Michael with United Veterans Worldwide for an interview today, post holidays, right before New Year's Day tomorrow. Excited to meet with my new friend Derek. Derek and I got in contact with each other recently, had a phone call a couple of days ago that was super powerful for me personally. Derek's one of those people who is well studied, well versed in trauma and recovery. And he has his own story he wants to share with us today that I'm super excited to hear about and recognize that in these stories lies the depth of emotion, of pain, of struggle, of overcoming, and getting to a place from darkness to a place of light where we can then reach outward, which is what Derek's doing, and we'll talk about that at the end. But I want to introduce everybody to Derek Pond. Derek, tell us a little bit about yourself that I haven't said already.
So I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I run and operate a couple clinics, and well, like probably almost everybody else on this channel, I've been through my own experiences of trauma and recovery. Um, so it's this is one of the first times I'm actually putting out a video. So in some ways I'm kind of nervous, but I mean, like actually telling my story. I've made little snippets and little videos and things like that, and spoken in different places, but this is I don't know, kind of like just pulling my heart out here like that, and well, there's a quote. I don't know if you mind me sharing.
Go for it.
I'm kind of a quote guy. I'm kind of an analogy guy, so you're gonna get a whole bunch of that from
And
me.
I'll take notes.
So Brene Brown, she said that courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen, right? And that's what I'm hoping to do a little bit here.
And you are in good company. I don't know if you know my story or at all. I've recorded it and shared it on the channel, but um, I'm well acquainted with trauma, with burying trauma, and having the outward signs of mental illness, physical illness, pain, and then working through that in the process of healing. And so you are in good company. So Derek, walk us backwards in time a little bit, and let's start from where you felt the beginning of some of your challenges lay, when most of us didn't really understand what resilience was or how to cope, and we found ourselves in some tough situations. So why don't you start back then?
Um, so mine might be different than a lot of people. My growing up, I felt protected. I felt loved. I felt like in a good, family. And mine started later in life, where actually I would say it's related to my marriage,
Mm.
right? Where in order to like make a marriage work and try to make things happen, I kind of eroded myself and just broke myself down until the point where I was just a kind of a hollow shell of who I thought I should be or who I used to be, you know, um, and felt very isolated, um, and really kind of sacrificed every little bit of me to try to, make something work that just wasn't in the end going to work anyway.
So that process of eroding, why do you think that you chose to do that?
Um, well, I am kind of a giver by nature. I want to help people heal, and in a lot of those ways, I wanted to help, my ex-wife heal. I wanted things to work, and I'm kind of the type of a person who's like, if I can just sacrifice this much more, or if I can give that little bit more of myself, or if I can do that, and over years and years and years of that, I became basically nothing of what I thought I was, and all of the real me, what I valued and what I found was important to me, I kind of just shoved it into this little corner and hid it in this little box and just said, you know what, my desire to feel, well, even loved, my feeling of self-worth, my um, in some ways even my just will to live and move on with life was not important to me anymore.
Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of ways to cope. And as a giver, as someone who's empathetic, you'll self-sacrifice to the last minute, where you have nothing left to give, and there goes your desire to live, right? And I've interviewed Canadian soldier, a female who was much like that, had some severe trauma in the military, sexual trauma, buried it, moved on, gave. And there came a point where she's like, I have to give myself time to recover, to heal, do things for myself that build me up, get my confidence back again. And I have to do that every day so that I'm continuing to feed my own soul, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But that's a hard thing to do when you're used to just giving to everybody else, right? It's hard to reserve any of that for you.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty easy thing to just like I mean literally be like, hey, you want my right arm? You want to take my left one too? What else can I give? And but it's so in the long run, it's so crippling, you know. And I didn't have anything left. I didn't have anything even left to give anybody else. And all I thought is, you know what, if I could just keep bearing the brunt of everything and keep pushing forward, and how do I keep doing that and supporting supporting somebody that I love deeply, but we just couldn't get things to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what kind of emotions came with it? Was it depression? Was it anxiety? Was it a lack of self-confidence? On and on and on.
All of that.
Mm.
I mean, I really felt like I had no value. I really felt like I didn't have any worth, or any way that I felt like I could contribute, to anybody. All along the way, though, it was complicated by those around me were also isolated from me, right? Where people were told not to talk to me, where people were told, you can't talk to him, don't ask him his opinion, don't worry about him. You can't talk to him because he is worthless. You can't talk to him because he's not supposed to be involved. You can't talk to him because of that. And and it was really kind of emphasized to all of those around me that despite actions of my own, right? I would always hope, like, hey, you know what? I hope people will actually see who I am. I hope people actually see the real me. And I didn't fight things. I didn't like argue things. I was like, I hope, people will actually see me for who I am, not for what they're told, but because everyone in my circle basically was told it again and again and again. It was like only those who really knew me still, and everybody else was like forced to isolate away from me.
Yeah, that's tough because there goes your support network, right? There goes your chance to heal with the help of others, and that's a hard place to be in. And I think many on this channel can relate to that feeling of isolation, whether it's isolation due to somebody else's actions leading to that, or like I did, I self-isolated. I pushed everybody else away because there was no way they were going to understand what I was going through, and I would rather sit in a dark room by myself, and and obviously that's destructive,
Right. I mean, I did the same thing, right? It was easier to be isolated in some ways.
Yep. How long did that last for you, Derek?
15 years. About.
That's a heavy burden to carry for 15 years. And were you already in your profession as a physical therapist at that time?
was going through school for that. Um, and a lot of instances through school and through all of that too, where the only way I made it through any of that is truly miraculous. Um, because I don't know how I did it actually. I would go and I would be in this deep dark hole, kind of in this just depressed state, and wouldn't be um, feeling bombarded and feeling attacked and feeling like, well, I am worthless. Truly feeling that.
Mm.
And then not even studying for an exam and going, well, okay, I'm gonna take it, and then somehow passing. Like I would never understand, you know. But there's been moments in my life where God's hand has been so clear, and Him helping me through school and helping me through all of that and helping me just continuing to guide me, even though I feel like my road was just dark and bleak and black
Mm.
and I didn't know how to move on, and I didn't even know how to take one foot and put it in front of the other at times. Um, and I can't really attribute to anything else other than God's hand in my life and the miracles that have happened.
Yeah, I'm glad that you've mentioned that, Derek, because on this channel I talk about a lot of different levers to pull. One of those levers, in addition to fitness, nutrition, making and keeping connections, working on our mental health, um, is increasing our spirituality. And I need to add another lever in there too, which is serving others, which is another way in which we really start to heal. But yeah, increasing our spirituality means connecting with that higher power and sometimes allowing Him to take that burden, because on our own, we just can't make sense of some of these things. And you talk about going through the motions while you're in school, struggling in a dark place mentally and in your soul, and going through the motions and still having success. Well, I don't know any other way to put it than a miracle too, because um,
Yeah.
the brain's not functioning normally, and yet you've been able to do it. When we first met, Derek, you mentioned that you came across the interview that I had with Brandy.
Yeah.
And that was one of my toughest interviews, topic wise, with her early trauma and abuse that was just so heavy. Um, and her journey of finding some measures of peace and developing a gift of healing with her touch. And I can't help but find the parallel in your struggles, fighting your demons, and getting to a place where you find your gift with touch as well.
Yeah. I'm That's actually one of the big reasons why I went into the profession I did, you know. Um because not only do I feel like I can help and connect with people and help people heal and help people like in their darkest points in their life sometimes,
Yep.
um but my path getting to PT was kind of a long one, you know. I mean, I always wanted to go into medicine. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. I even worked in the operating room and loved it, right? But then I realized I want to work with people, like with people, and in their dark times with people.
Mm.
And so for PT for me was like me jumping in the trench with somebody and saying, you know what, life sucks and it's really hard at times, but we're gonna figure this out and we're gonna do this. And you want to get back to baseball or soccer or basketball, great. You want to be able to pick up your grandkids again? Great. You want to be able to do something like that? Let's figure this out. And it's not going to be easy, but I'm here with you. And that was like one of the big drives for me becoming a PT in the first place. And I didn't realize it necessarily at the time, I don't think. It was like when I was going through school and I was going through my own darkness, and I was going through that. And it was like, but this like drew me into like, because of some of the things that I had experienced, it's like I wanted to help and I wanted to give and I wanted to share and I wanted to kind of do the same thing, for other people.
Yeah, and I love that about physical therapists who had a vision of wanting to make a difference in people's lives for their career, because it is a career of service, not unlike veterans and first responders that this channel was originally built for, who have given so much in a career of service, right? I love the fact that you have my physical therapist here in town where I'm at. I came after I just had this full replacement of this shoulder, and I couldn't move it. And he worked with me for over a year, getting me to a place of movement, and I'm lifting weights again, and I'm doing pull-ups again. And it's like it made a whole world of difference, because he said, "What's your goal? I don't know if it's possible, but let's work as if it is possible." And it was
Right.
possible. And I love the fact that that healing can happen with what you're doing for work. So so talk to me about other levers that you've pulled to get to a place of healing.
I mean, we already touched on one of them, the spirituality, and building that connection, that relationship with God, and knowing that God understands me, right?
Mm,
Um, I think one of the other big ones for me though is actually again like service, being able to serve and be able to help other people. Um, Additionally, I think I've used my education as a PT and some of the things I've learned about just how the body heals and how we recover physically, and kind of applied that universally to how do I recover. I mean, from everything, emotionally and psychologically. How do I recover from the trauma, which is just as real and just as painful and just as palpable as these physical injuries that happened? How do I do that? And a lot of the principles, though, apply the same. And so I've been able to kind of do that. I mean, obviously, it's been a long journey, and obviously, I still have a lot to do and to continue to grow and to continue to try to develop. But trying to apply these things um, just universally to myself has given me also the insight on how do I help people around me.
so can you list those universal truths that we talked about, and tell the audience about what that looks like?
Yeah. So as a PT, we deal a lot with tissue recovery and healing and trauma, honestly, that happens to your body.
Yeah.
And the way that we heal is a lot of how we heal emotionally as well. I mean, if we talk about there's a couple different laws like in physiology. I know we talked about this a little bit when we were on a phone call, but
Yeah.
there's one call that I mean, sorry, there's one law that's called Davis's law, and Davis's law basically talks about soft tissue, and it's like, well, our soft tissue, meaning like our tissue, our muscles, our tendons, our ligaments, those will repair themselves and strengthen themselves based on how much they're stressed, based on how much they're pulled on, right? And then there's another one called Wolff's Law, which is the same thing, but it's applied to bones. And it basically says the same thing. Our bones will strengthen and mineralize and build strength based on how much we stress them. So one of the biggest things, like for example, we teach for people that have osteoporosis is you need to do weightlifting. Actually, you need to put some stress on those bones, but it's got to be out of applied stress, right? There's obviously you can overdo things, and then
Mm-hmm.
you out stress the tissue, and it's not structurally capable of withstanding that load,
Yeah.
right? But the way that it's going to repair is by stressing it. The way that it's going to heal is by pushing on it,
Yeah.
you know? And even after a trauma, I teach this to my patients all the time. Even after that trauma and even after the injury, your body starts throwing scar tissue down all over the place. And your scar tissue, well, it's going to apply Davis's law because that's a soft tissue. So that scar tissue is going to change, is going to remodel based on based on the pressures that we put on that tissue. So if we want that scar tissue, that deep seated repair of that trauma or how we held things together, if we want that to repair, Well, we've got to put the appropriate applied stress on it. It's like the same thing, you know? And so I've like all of this, I mean, just on the surface level, you hear this and you go, yeah, are you even talking about like the body repairing? Or are you talking about emotionally and psychologically how we repair? Because it applies perfectly. And it's one of those universal truths that I think that just fits, you know, are the things that we've experienced in this life, be it physical, emotional, psychological, sexual trauma, whatever it is, right? Those things can either break us or they can create us into something that is more. You know, it's there's that often quoted line that it's the let's see, it's the fractures, it's where we're broken that lets the light into our life. You know,
Yeah, I like that
and
quote. Yeah.
it's like the I know we talked about this before too, but there's a Japanese tradition. It's called kitsugi, and it's where a broken vessel, a broken piece of pottery, is then repaired with either gold or with silver. And because now it's been broken, but it's been put back together, it's actually way more valuable than whatever that pottery was before it. And that applies to all of us.
Mm.
You know, those of us, I mean, everybody's broken in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everybody's broken. And I was so broken from my experience in my first marriage that I felt like I was that broken piece of pottery, but I couldn't hold anything within me.
Mm.
Like anything I wanted and was valued and wanted to have in my life, it just like seeped out. I couldn't keep a hold of it. And unfortunately, that led to a divorce again. So a second divorce because I felt like I couldn't be loved. I felt like I wasn't worthy of love, and I felt like the love that was given to me almost hurt.
Mm.
You know, to where I made it hurt. Because I had made it so that love is foreign. Love is not okay. Love is something you don't want, you don't desire. And I conditioned myself to believe that so internally, as a way of just coping through a really tough experience.
Yeah.
Because I didn't heal from that, I didn't let the love of somebody else actually stay inside of me. I just let it seep out. I couldn't hold it. I couldn't keep it. And then it hurt me to feel it,
Mm.
you know? And so, I mean, it's taken a lot of work and I'm still working on it, but to piece those pieces back together, you know, and again, using the concept of that kitsugi, when they're put back together, it's more valuable, it's more precious, it's more beautiful. And a lot of the trauma that we experience, again, if we let it, it makes us that. It makes us stronger. It makes us more compassionate. It makes us more understanding. It makes us more beautiful. But it takes work to do it. You know,
Yeah.
takes a lot of work.
What you're talking about is not passive work. It's deliberate work.
Right.
Over time that eventually takes that fracture and seals it up with something more valuable, more precious, right? And that takes work. One of the concepts that I've recently discussed is the difference between being cured and being healed. And the process of being cured is taking you from a state of illness or injury or mental unhealth and returning you to the beginning process where you were whole. And healed is taking you from the condition where you are to a new state of being. Cured is not something that most of us will ever really truly experience from serious trauma, but we can be healed and we can get to a new place of being. And that new place of being is a new version of us that is more empathetic, can relate to other people, can lift other people. I love the imagery and the idea of that can only come from a fractured soul being healed that can then make a difference and relate.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that, right?
I wish it wasn't true.
I wish it wasn't true too, right? I wish I didn't have to experience. I wish people that I know and love did not have to experience the things that they have experienced. I wish I could take it from them.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, I don't know, looking at my kids. So I've got 5 kids, right? And looking at them, well, I wish I could just do everything for them, right? I wish I could just like, hey, here's everything. And I think God looks at us similarly.
Mm-hmm.
God's like, hey, I would do everything for you, but I know that's not how you're going to become who you need to be, right?
Yeah.
God looks at us and says, you know what? I want you to be compassionate. I'm going to make you so that you can be strong. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make you so that you will be able to help and to heal and to guide and to live a life that is worthy of you, because I know you've got so much worth inside of you. And so instead of God saying, well, here, I'm going to give you the easiest path possible, the life that God has to create for us in order for that to happen is rocky and is bumpy and is dark at times and is painful. And because that's the way that we are created into who we really can become. And it's like that concept of curing or healing. Well, we're going to become so much more because of the things we've experienced. And so going back to kind of like how muscles work and how like physiology and how our body heals and stuff like that, right? Like I sorry, I'm gonna grab a drink of water. I teach all the time, though, to my patients that like there's an appropriate amount of trauma that has to happen in order to get to where you want to be. If we were to go work out, you do any workout routine, you go to the gym, you start working out, you actually have to push your physical capacity past what it can do to where you break it down and you actually cause damage. You actually start to cause destruction in that tissue.
Yep.
Okay. You actually rip it apart. That's kind of what happens. And then your body builds it up stronger. And if you want to continue to progress, you've got to push it past what you can do again, and you rip it apart, and then your body builds it up stronger. And that process continues and continues and continues until you look back way later and you're so much stronger. You're so much more capable. You have so much more in you. And the only way that happened is because you were getting ripped apart, literally, and building that strength up in like secondary to that. On the flip side, we could sit in our comfort zone, right? We could sit to where it's easy and saying, well, this is what I can do. Mm-hmm. This is what I know. This is great. I can do this stuff all day long. And to use another analogy, right? So there's this thing in PT we deal with all the time, and it's called a frozen shoulder.
Yes.
Okay. Or adhesive capsulitis is what it's called. Okay. And so in our shoulder is super complex. It can do all these crazy things, right? And so because of that, there's not a lot of bony structure that holds our arm on. It's just this little tiny collarbone. That's the only bony connection for our whole arm to the rest of our body. And everything else is actually muscular. So there's a lot of complexity in the muscles, and because of all the motion, the joint capsule, it's basically like plastic wrap that surrounds the joint, right? It is very complex too, and there's folds and there's intricacies in it. And so if we created some trauma in that shoulder and we got some inflammation there, and then it hurt, okay, and then it hurt and we didn't want to move it. Mm-hmm. It's like, ooh, that hurts to move. Oh, that hurts to move. And so we just kept it right where it was and we didn't move it. What actually starts to happen is that capsule sticks to itself and it adheres down to where then you can't move it, I mean, then it hurts like hell.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we were to like sit there and say, well, I've experienced this trauma, here I am. That hurts. That hurts. That we actually make that problem worse. Right.
Yeah.
And then then we have to break through other things in order to heal the initial insult, the initial injury. And so by like pushing into that, like with a frozen shoulder, we push into what you can do, and then we let it come back, right? But you got to push. It's going to hurt a little bit.
It will.
And it's not going to feel good. But then it's going to feel better later. Mm-hmm. Right? And then you're going to get the motion back in your arm, you know? And then whatever that injury might have been, well, then we can take care of that along the way. And we don't have to break through this stuff in order to heal it in the beginning. And so, again, it applies to everything else. I think all of this is universal truths. That's one of my favorite things about my job, PT. It's like, well, again, this applies universally. Is that if we've experienced something that hurted us, if we can keep moving, if we can keep pushing forward, and if we can keep pushing into our capacity, then we enlarge we make our capacity so much more, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't shrink down and freeze us up.
Yeah. So to play with that analogy a little bit, I had an experience in the gym this morning. I have a buddy come over and we work out in my garage and we lift heavy, and he said, and it's been about a month and a half since he's worked out with me because of holidays and other things. And he's like, whoa, you went up in weight quite a bit. Like you're doing we did a back workout. So we're doing some big pulls today. He's like, whoa, you went up a whole lot. And I was like, you know what I found myself doing over the last year has been, oh, this is my weight and I do my reps and it's not hard. It's nice and easy and it's comfortable for me. And I would just stay in that zone for a year. And he was slowly moving up and caught up to where I was. And then one day when I was working out with my son and my son started to get stronger, and I was like, I can't let him do the same weight as me. So I went up in weight. And it's that principle of if you do what's comfortable, and I started to not see the gains physically that I was looking for. Not just in strength, but in appearance and everything else. Until I started to really challenge and push it a little bit more. And then I started to progress. I'm going to make that analogy apply to my journey of healing. I faced a very, very dangerous scenario in Iraq. I was taken by the enemy with another soldier. I envisioned my head being chopped off on video and sent to my family. We escaped, we got out, we got back, but this soldier and I never spoke about it to each other ever again. We never mentioned it to anybody else. We just hid the fact that we allowed ourselves to be in a position that got captured. I buried that for so many years and I just pushed it down. Well, part of my therapy at home base in Boston, I did an outpatient program for a couple of weeks where they not forced me, that's a bad word. They encouraged me highly to face down my experience, my trauma, repeat it over and over again until it became something where I could deal with it without a massive emotional experience, right? And it's still hard for me at times. I get caught in my throat because it's still pretty rough. But turning into our fears or turning into that resistance, the headwinds that gives us the capability to overcome some of that trauma. For yourself, Derek, maybe it looks like looking in the mirror every day and saying, my worth isn't earned. My worth has been given to me from the day I was born. I
Boy,
am
you should see
deserving.
my bathroom mirror, actually. There's like sticky notes all over that actually are just like this. you know, that remind that I have to remind myself every single day,
Yeah.
that I am enough,
Hmm.
that I am worthy of happiness.
You
That I
deserve to be
can find
loved.
peace, all of this, right? Yeah. It's a daily, it takes that daily work. It's not something you can do once and then say, oh great, I'm good, I'm done.
Yeah.
You know? And I mean, it gets better, it gets easier,
Hmm.
but the trauma doesn't go away,
No.
you know,
Yeah.
and that pain doesn't necessarily go away, but it lessens with time and lessens with work, you
Yeah.
know.
There's an interesting principle, and it comes from making mistakes that have injured you or somebody else. It comes from we don't forget, but we can
Right.
still heal. And I think part of that not forgetting is the reminder that we are not better than somebody else. It reminds us to stay humble. Um, I've had guys on the channel here who um, are embarrassed about their military service because they only served a year or two and got kicked out because they were suffering with some severe PTSD. And I want to put my arms around these guys and be like, brother, like, just because I did 17 years before I was wounded and got out, it doesn't make us different. Like, I'm with you, you're with
Right.
me, we're together, like, we're united. Your service is just much as important as mine. And Derek, your gift of healing in your line of your career of service is just as important as mine. Um, there's no hierarchy of higher or lower. We are eye to eye, pushing through trauma, pushing through recovery, aligned. And I love the fact that you're sharing this journey that so many people can relate to. And marriages are not easy. They're some of the toughest relationships we ever have to manage in life, but can also be some of the most rewarding. Um, if I had my wife in the room today and she stood by me and I said, "How do you feel about me as your husband?" There'll be days where she's like, "Oh, boy, oh." And there are other days where she's like, "Oh, I so appreciate that you wake up, you get your workouts in, you try to stay fit, you go to work every day and you work hard and in a career that maybe you don't feel you're that good at, and you keep pushing forward. Thank you." Like, that's the relationship, right? We don't always look at each other like we're newlyweds and it's like, oh, we're so lucky. But that that relationship can is so rocky for a reason because every time it makes us stronger, it makes us grow and develop, right? It's just
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know that makes me think of I know we talked about this before too, but this is another thing I teach my patients all the time is like there's what I call a therapeutic maximum, right? And it's basically like if we took our healing, we put it on a big old continuum, or we took our relationships, right, and we put them on a big old continuum. But talking about physical healing, there's putting no effort in. There's literally like sitting on the couch, and then we create that frozen shoulder. We call it contracture. We create that, right, because we're not doing anything. And then there's on the other end of the spectrum, there's like we pushed so hard and I gave everything and didn't let any rest, didn't let anything, heal, just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed to where we actually cause damage.
Mm-hmm.
And physically we're creating inflammation. We're actually damaging the tissue faster than we can repair it. Right? We're creating swelling that then we've got to take care of before we can repair it. We're making it so it hurts now to move, and now I can't do as much. And so there's this big continuum right there. And somewhere in the middle here, there is this moving target that is going back and forth, right? And we don't necessarily know where it is day to day,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to try to push to find it. And so physically, what I tell my patients is, you know what, some days you're going to feel great. You'd be like, great, I did all my exercises. I went for a walk. I was feeling great. My pain was pretty much under control. I did really good. And I was able to push pretty far. And then some days you're going to wake up and everything's swollen and everything hurts and everything's painful. But that doesn't mean you just sit on the couch and do nothing. It's like, what can you do that day? And that might be your therapeutic maximum. Maybe it was, great, I moved my knee a little bit that day, right? And I put ice and I put stim on it, and I just was like, oh my gosh, that's painful and that was hard. Okay. But if we can keep pushing into that and trying to find where that window is every single day, that's how we progress. That's how we keep moving.
Yeah.
And emotionally and psychologically, it's the same. And or in a relationship, it's the same. Some days it's like, man, I can just give you love, or I can just do it, and I can just give from myself. And some days it's like, man, I don't have as much today.
Yeah.
But even if that's like I gave a smile to somebody, even when I was feeling pretty bad inside,
Yep.
who knows what that impact could have been,
True.
right?
True.
You just checked that box. That might have been your maximum that day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I love this principle. And one of the things I say often on this channel is I challenge people, especially when I'm doing workouts and I show my workouts. I say, do something hard today that pushes you. For me, it's getting an extra workout in the afternoon, like a high intensity cardio for 15 minutes or a cold plunge, as an example. Those things are hard for me mentally to get into, but the reward for me on the backside is so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you also mention that there are times where pushing becomes destructive, right?
Right.
My buddy Daniel from Slovakia, who's a dietitian, he coaches people on fitness and nutrition. He shared an example of filling a cup, and he's like, work stress, family stress, relationships, whatever, and this water is coming to the top of the brim, and then he's like, oh, but I forgot to work out for the day. And then he pours in and it overflows the cup. And he said, now, Michael, you talk about fitness all the time and nutrition, but how does that work with this scenario? And I was like, I don't freaking know. He says, there are days where getting that extra workout in doesn't align with where your cup's at. He says, some days that fitness can actually decrease the liquid in your cup and give you more capacity to do stuff. But other days it spills over. He's like, so what you have to do is pay attention to how your body really feels and then identify it and say, you know what? I really don't feel like getting that extra workout in right now. I'm going to let myself recover and rest. The same principle is true for emotional repair and damage. There are times where you can give, and it's unproductive.
Right.
Right? And so you have to pay attention. The same applies to nutrition, right? Nutrition feeds the mind. And when we talk about mental health and strategies for getting better, if you can attune yourself to what your body's asking for, and I don't mean that voice that says, Reese's peanut butter cups, give me some more, right? Not that one, but the other one that says, hey, I'm needing a little something more substantive. And you're like, okay, so I need to add some protein into my diet right now. Or I need something a little bit lighter. Great, I'm going to eat those vegetables as my snack. The body will tell you what it needs, and it won't overflow your cup. Yeah, good principle.
Yeah, I mean that's a similar thing, right? Like I tell my patients, like our body heals better when we're moving. Movement actually is going to decrease swelling. It's actually going to improve your tissue repair to a point, right? And then you get to the point where you're doing so much, you're causing more swelling than you can process.
Yep.
You're damaging the tissue, right?
Yep. And
so there can be, well, too little or too much of everything, you know. But it's in that magic moment is where we really create the changes that we need to be able to progress as we need. But again, that's a moving target, right?
So you called that therapeutic maximum, which is
that's what I call it. That is a total made up term by me.
I call it
the therapeutic maximum. It's like, yep, you're doing as much as you can to progress as much and as fast as possible. And again, some days it's way up here and you can push, and some days it's like, I got off the couch.
Yeah.
Good, you did that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you did that, great. If you feel like you can do more, great. But some days you can't.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I tell my patients, it's okay,
Yep.
but you got to keep pushing.
Yep.
And that's the only way you keep moving.
Yeah, brother. Yeah. Derek, as we get to the end of this interview today, the last couple minutes I want to give to you to kind of give some advice to people who today are struggling, who are the people who are sitting stagnant in a room that's dark and isolating, maybe turning to drugs and alcohol as a way of coping with their trauma. What advice can you share with them today?
I think the biggest thing was one of the hardest things for me to learn. You know, that you were worth it.
Mm.
And you're worth every effort that you put into your life. There are people around you that love you, even if you feel isolated. One of the hardest lessons that I had to learn was that I had created all these ideas of what I wanted my life to be. You know, and because my life was not there, I felt like I was a failure.
Mm.
I felt like I didn't measure up, right? It was completely different than what I ever anticipated being, right? I mean, I've now been divorced twice. I, struggles with my kids, lots of different things, right? And if I measured myself to the expectations that I had for myself,
Yeah.
well, then I'm a complete failure if I look at it that way, you know. I think I shared this quote with you before too, but Michael J. Fox, right, who has been such an inspiring person in the last several years.
Yeah.
I mean, we know he's got Parkinson's and has been struggling with that and everything he's been through, right? But he's taking his challenge and he's created this foundation and he's enabling, empowering other people, and he's like doing the best he can with what's been given to him. Not only the best he can, he's like, helping thousands of people with it. And he said that my happiness grows in direct proportion to my acceptance and inverse proportion to my expectations. And so our situation is probably not what we expected. Right?
Can you say that quote one more time?
Yeah. So my happiness grows in direct proportion to my acceptance and in inverse proportion to my expectations. So it's taking what has happened to us and accepting it for what it is. Yeah, it sucked,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is, though. And we can either accept that or we can hold that up against our expectations and then feel like we have failed or feel like we are less than or feel like we don't deserve or to feel where we can't be happy because our expectations were here and what has happened is here. But if we can accept that and know that that is enough for us,
Mm-hmm.
that is enough, whatever it is. And we can use that just like, again, Michael J. Fox, Parkinson's and everything that's been happening to him. We can use that to not only empower ourselves, but to empower those around us.
Mm.
Again, I'm kind of a quote guy and an analogy guy a little bit, but there's another quote by Andrea Dijkstra. I think it's how you say her last name. But and she said, in order to love who you are, you cannot hate the experiences that shaped you.
Ooh.
And so that was another hard truth that I had to learn too, right? Because I hated all the things that had ever happened to me. I hated that I had to go through that. But in order for me to actually move on and to love who I am now, I couldn't hate everything that has happened to me. I had to let it go. in order to heal.
Wow, that's a powerful one. Let me think about that for a second. Not hate the experiences that shaped and
Yeah.
what it's made you.
Right.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. Not hating the experiences that shaped you is was a really hard truth for me to accept, you know. But I think if we're to really move forward and create a life that we want, well, I'm an analogy guy, right? It's like driving a car. We're driving our car, and we can either be looking out the window, the front windshield, and seeing where we want to go and seeing where we're moving forward, or we can be stuck in the rearview mirror. Okay. And we're never going to get to our destination, or never going to get to where we want if we're only focused on that rearview mirror.
Mm.
That rearview mirror is to check, right? To make sure that maybe changing lanes is going to be safe. To be like, okay, I can compare this to where I've been, and I know I can make this shift. But the windshield is where we want to go. And we need to take that almost in like, okay, our life needs to be this much where we're headed and this much where we've been, right? But only use that as a reference for making shifts, for making adjustments.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I interviewed a retired police officer recently, and he's got a great channel. And he told me a story about his father, who was a World War II veteran, and went through all these hellacious battles in World War II, kept his flak jacket from World War II in the trunk of his car. And on days where he's driving and life is just, filling his cup too much, he pulled over on the side of the road, pops his trunk, and looks in the back at that jacket and is like, that was hard. What I can do now is a lot easier, and I know I can get through it. And she shuts the trunk, gets back in, and goes.
Right.
A lot like what you just said. The rearview mirror is there for a reason. We don't forget, but we use it as a guide for how we're going to react going forward, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Derek, thanks so much for sharing your journey with us. And this doesn't have to be the last time you come on the channel and share where you're at and what you're doing. I appreciate you talking through the important aspects of suffering trauma and divorces and learning who you are as a person and learning to love yourself and find that love, which so many people in the world today need to recognize that that's not earned. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be confident and cared for. And also the principle of going through a trauma and a pain, allowing God to be part of that healing process, and then finding your gift of healing, which is giving back. And that's the true measure of someone who's progressing, is to be able to give back to somebody else and help lift them, and what you're doing as a profession and doing on this channel today. So yeah, Derek, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, brother.
It's been healing and good for me just being on this,
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And we'll be in connection going forward. So if you ever need a friend, brother, I'm here for you. That's a commitment.
Hey, likewise. I really mean that every time.
I appreciate it. Thanks, brother.